Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Boozer. I'm with keeping your company's name out of the next security breach headlines with NetScaler. With us today is Jake Rutski. He is the Senior Product Marketing Manager at Citrix, and you can see him down below, see his Twitter handle. You can follow him at jrutski. But before I hand things over to Jake, I'm going to introduce our moderator, Patrick Coble. He is a CTP and a leader of our Nashville CUGC group. You can find him on Twitter at VDI Hacker, and he also, speaking of security, has written a great blog post for CUGC just recently on some great security tips for you guys. This is the last day of National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, so I'll put a link in the chat to that blog post for you in just a little bit. But Patrick, do you want to say hello really quickly to everyone out there?
Hello, everyone. I hope you're excited to learn about some awesome NetScaler things.
Thank you. And Patrick's going to keep an eye on the questions for us today. So please type those in as we go along, and Jake will take periodic breaks as he can throughout the presentation today to answer some questions, but we may save a lot of them for the end. It just kind of depends on what they are and how things go. But do type them in as you have them, and Patrick will keep an eye on those. And with that, I'm going to hand things right over to Jake to kick us off. And with that, Jake, I do want to thank you for having this webinar on Halloween, because security is a scary topic for some people. So it's a good day to be talking about it. I'm sending the screen your way right now.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie.
You're welcome.
Yeah, no, it's good and scary. So I'm going to make sure that you guys can see my screen. If you could just make sure and confirm you can hear me, you can see things. Hopefully everything looks good, sounds good.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so happy Halloween, everybody. Hopefully it's not scary. We're going to talk about some scary stuff here, right? Security and how to not be this month's security breach headline, because you know it's happening all the time. You know, there's Target, there's, well, I can't even single one out. There's just so many. But you know, since security is kind of a broad topic, we're going to try to narrow it down just a little tiny bit. And of course, this being CUGC, we are talking Citrix, and we are talking Citrix ADC, aka NetScaler. I am probably going to slip up and say NetScaler too, just because that's what I've always said. So NetScaler, Citrix ADC, same thing. And as mentioned, my name is Jacob Rutski. I'm on the product marketing team here. And you can find me at jrutski on the Twitters. Please ask questions. I'll try to answer questions live, but I'm working from my laptop, so maybe we'll see. Try to take some breaks. So anyway, let's get started, and let's talk about where in the heck we're going to start with security. So it really is a nice broad topic, and you know, it can be kind of daunting because you just, you know, you never know if you don't have a good security background, or if, you know, if you're kind of in a new environment or you manage a large environment, it, you know, it can be daunting and you don't necessarily know a good place to start. So let's kind of pick something that hopefully everybody is familiar with. And that's going to be maybe just some app, some website, some service, something, right, that you're exposing to the public. And it could be something that's running on-prem, something you've got running up in Azure, up in AWS. But the point is that it's an application that, you know, provides something. And in our super awesome web app, we've got a, you know, bunch of users there on the right. You've got a, like a, you know, layer 3, layer 4 firewall that allows some stuff through. And then, you know, you've got the application itself. Maybe there's a database in the background, and it's, you know, it's hosting some service, some application, maybe a website, maybe it's content management, or maybe it's, you know, some of the traditional applications like Microsoft Exchange, Outlook Web Access, or SharePoint, or whatever it is. And we need to present this app or this service to users, and we're going to do that through our firewall. We're going to allow those sneaky users to our service. No big deal. I'm just going to open up the traditional web ports. And since I don't want things going across in clear text, right, step one is going to be encryption. And encryption is nothing more, right, than really complex math. Well, math is hard. And so is encryption. Getting encryption right is a really, really tricky thing. So that's kind of where we're going to start. And I'm suggesting that we start here just as kind of a baseline. So there's a really, really nice tool, and hopefully everybody here has heard of it. And if you haven't, please go check it out right now. There's the QR code you can scan. If you've never been out to the SSL Lab site, this tool is awesome. It's a really nice, easy way. You can kind of think of it as almost like a pen testing tool that you get for free. They don't charge anything for it. It's continuously developed. There's a lot of vulnerabilities that happen to be at this kind of layer 3, layer 4, whatever layer you want to call TLS. And there's a lot of vulnerabilities that end up at this layer. So they are constantly adding those vulnerabilities in. And if you're not sure if, hey, am I vulnerable? Am I up to best practice? This is a really awesome way to check and see if you are. Now, there is one caveat, is there's this little checkbox. Please check the box. What this does is this prevents you, and I'll show you what I mean. This prevents your website from being posted on their boards as to who's gotten what score. So we'll check that box. So let's check it out real quick. So here it is. This is the website, and so these are the boards, right? You can see who's been recently scanned, who scored the best, who scored the worst. Probably if you're not sure, if you're going to get a good score or not, maybe you check the box, but I would suggest checking the box anyhow. So I'm going to go ahead and check the box. I'm going to punch in my awesome website, and I'm going to go off on my merry way, hit submit. Now, what ends up happening is this takes about a minute or so. And what it's doing is it's analyzing, or kind of doing like a basic pen test on your service. And like I said, if you have any service or website or anything that's exposed to the public, I strongly suggest that you go out and do this, because it's a good way to get some sort of baseline. Okay, where am I at? And what it's going to check is a number of different things, but they all relate to cryptography. So the first thing it's going to look at, and you can see it's kind of going through a bunch of different things. It does take a little bit of time to go through, but it looks at your certificate, right? Is your certificate valid? Is it trusted by most, if not all, clients? There you go. It's finished up. It gives you a grade. We'll go through each of these things real quick here. So again, back to the certificate. It looks at the certificate itself. Is it a SHA-2? Hopefully nobody has a SHA-1 signed certificate. If you do, you need to get it renewed right quick. Do you have the full chain? And we'll talk about that and how to configure that on a NetScaler. But again, if you don't have that full chain, you're not going to have that full chain of trust. So that's one of the things that it checks. DNS CAA is a kind of a bonus. It's a DNS way to validate your certificate, and so they do trust that. And you can see the trust is all the way across there. And if you look at the certification path, right, you can see for each of the major platforms, looks at the Mozilla Trust Store, the Apple Trust Store, Windows, Java, Android, etc. You can see here my service certificate, which is this wildcard cert here, that was sent by the server or the NetScaler. This secure server, the CA certificate, which is the one that actually issued my server cert, that was also sent by the server. But then this down here, the root certificate, that was not sent, but it doesn't need to be, because that is in the trust store. And if we take a look at some of these other clients over here, you can see that they're all showing as being in the trust store. Now, next thing we're going to look at is some protocols and Cipher suites here. So what you can see here is the only two that I have supported right now are TLS 1.3 and 1.2. Now, they do only support the 8446 version of the ratification, and there's some issues, and I'll get to that. They also show what Cipher suites are supported. Both TLS 1.3 and TLS 1.2, I have a very finite number of ciphers that I have bound to the V server. And again, we'll go through all of this. But again, you can see here, it's reporting all these things back to you. Next thing we're going to look at is a handshake simulation. And what it's doing is it's simulating a handshake, a TLS handshake with your server using all sorts of different clients like Safari, different versions of browsers, i.e. Firefox, Chrome, Java, all these sort of things. And you can see here what will get negotiated. So most everything does negotiate up to TLS 1.2 because that's really the only option. Chrome 70 on Win 10 does support TLS 1.3, so that's good stuff there. Now there's also some protocol mismatches, and you can see here these are kind of rather old, right? IE6 XP, gosh, I hope nobody's running IE6 and XP, but in that case, what will happen is those people will not be able to access my site. Now that is another something that's important that you need to think about when you're doing this is, okay, so I'm going to start, hardening my site and making sure that I'm up to date. Well, if you've got some folks that are on IE6 running, on XP, then they're not going to be able to access your site anymore. So you do need to be careful there and understand that you might actually be causing an issue for some of these folks as you, start hardening and start tightening things down. The last thing it takes a look at is some of those vulnerabilities that I mentioned. We look at the beast attack, it's mitigated. Poodle, not vulnerable. There's no RC4 ciphers. Heartbleed is not vulnerable. There's a couple of CVEs in there. And we do support forward secrecy. Now, forward secrecy or elliptic curve cryptography or ECDHE, or it's known by any number of different names. That's kind of like TLS.next. It's a different kind of cryptography, and it's really meant to be forward. It's perfect forward secrecy, right? So it's completely secret. So you can't, open up a Wireshark, and even if you have the private key, you can't decrypt anything that's ECC. So ECC is good stuff, but you also need to be aware that because it is, kind of higher math, mathematical functions, that there is an overhead as far as computational power is concerned. Let's go back up to the top and just take a look real fast at the grade here. So it does kind of give you a grade and breaks down everything that it checks. So certificate is 100, protocol support is 100, key exchange is a 90, and cipher strength is 100, and this is an A. So this is actually an issue, and I've reported this with them, and there's some other people that confirmed it, but this should actually be an A+. Now the reason it's an A and not an A+ is because if we scroll down here to the bottom, sorry for going around so much, I don't supposedly have support for downgrade attack prevention. That's actually not true. The NetScaler does completely support Tls Fallback SCSV, and the reason it's saying that I don't support it is because the only protocols that I have enabled are 1.3 and 1.2. So the test that they use to determine if that's enabled, you have to have a lower protocol than 1.2 enabled, which I don't hear. And the irony there, right, is if I were to enable 1.1 or 1.0, for example, my cipher strength would drop down, but then my overall grade would be an A+. So again, that's an issue with their test, but that's a fairly minor thing, and if you understand it, you should be good there. So real quick, that's the SSL Labs test in a nutshell. Like I said, go test all your public-facing sites and services. That's a great place to start if you're not sure where to start. Tests a lot of stuff, and best of all, it costs $0. Just make sure you check the box that says "Do not show my results." I'm going to take a quick poll, make sure there's no questions or anything like that, and I will hop back onto some slides here. Okay, cool. So I don't see any questions. Moving right along. Okay, so you started there. Now, let's talk about how we get level 9 access without a password, because that's the fun, scary stuff. Back to our super awesome web app. Well, this is going to be our web app 2.0. Similar idea here. We've got a firewall. We've got some users that we want access to this app. So this app is actually running on Drupal on an application server or web server. And it's hosting some content. And behind it, there is, in fact, a MySQL database. and the web tier consists of a load balancer. And of course, all of these are broken apart into their own different DMZ zones or segments. So, only these specific ports are open, right? I only have 80 and 443 from the front end, and really it's only 443. 3306 for the MySQL connection to the backend database. And I'm kind of picking on another vendor that recently had a world event, and this is one of their keynotes. Not naming any names or anything, but I was kind of questioning some of their practices. Anyway, so this is a kind of a common scenario, right, for your web applications. So let's take another quick peek at that application. And like I said, it is running on Drupal. So here's my super awesome, fun little website. And as you can see, I've got some posts on here, and it's real basic and what have you, but it is a website. Think of it as whatever it may be. Now, let's do some fun stuff. Let's hop into I've got a Linux box here, and I'm going to hop into my demo environment here, and I am going to run a script. And while I'm thinking about it, hopefully you guys can see this. Let me zoom in here. So I'm going to run this little script, and I know Patrick knows what this script is, but it's a little bit scary. It's going to ask me for who I want to hit.
When there's Python, we know it's serious.
So this is just a little bit of some serious Python. What it's doing is it is taking a look at, it's doing some kind of recon. And what it's telling me is this site, even though it has no idea otherwise, this site is running on an Apache box, version 2.4.18. It's running on Ubuntu. It's powered by PHP 7.0.32. It is in fact running Drupal 8. You can see some other stuff in there, right? But this is really kind of important information if I am, if I'm going to try to break into this site, which, oh gosh, I sure am. Now, the thing that's important here is this looks really scary, but it's really not. And what I mean by that is if I just look at this script, it's like 6 lines of code, and all it's doing is looking at my headers. So you don't need that Python script to do this. You can really just hit F12 on your browser, do a reload, and we hop in here, look at my response headers. There it is, right? You can see right there, it's running Drupal 8, right? It's running on Apache 2.4.18. That, it looks really scary because it's Python. Now, not to say that, we can't do other fun stuff, which we're going to do here in just a hot second. But the point is, headers give away a lot of information, and you can certainly do something about that. But it's really just more for recon purposes. And what recon does is it makes the job of finding stuff just that much more easy. Now, obviously, you can clean some of this up, right? I can, configure my PHP application not to give itself away. I can use NetScaler Rewrite to hide some of these X powered by headers so that they don't, leak out beyond the website. But the thing is, if this is exposed to the world and I look at this and I've used Drupal before, it says at the very top, powered by Drupal, it says down there at the bottom somewhere, and just the overall feeling of the page, I know it's Drupal. If I look at WordPress, I know it's WordPress, those sort of things. So there's only so much you can do to kind of prevent some of that information leakage, let's just say. So let's hop back over to our fun Linux box here. Now, what I'm going to do now is the fun bits, let's say. So let me zoom in here. Well, I'll hold off on that just a second. So what's it called? Okay. We do this, and we tell it where to go. And we spell. Now, I know you're probably thinking, okay, well, wait a minute. You're probably sitting right next to that box. Well, that's not really the case, right? This is behind a layer 3-4 firewall, and it's not just some NAT rule, right? If we happen to look on this DMZ box here, it is actually sitting behind Sophos UTM. There's some security services turned on. If I can remember how to log in here, we'll do that real quick. Okay, so I do have ATP, threat protection is turned on. There's the firewall, 3.4 firewall, intrusion prevention is turned on, web filtering is turned on, IDP is turned on, right? So you can see it, it's not just a, a humdrum firewall. So you'd think maybe I would get some protection, maybe, keyword there. So let's hop back anyway to my, oops, that was right there. Let's hop back and let's do some exploits. Typical thing to say here is, of course, don't do this. It's completely legal. Only do this if you own the thing that you're actually, trying to break into. Otherwise, you might go to jail. Blah 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 blah. Typical thing there. So let's go ahead and do some exploits. Now, because I know that this is running Drupal, I have an exploit that's specific for this environment. And I think the window's too small, so we'll just make it a little bit bigger. There we go. So we can see now if I do some cool stuff here like host name, I can see that I am in fact on the web app 01. If I run an IP address, right, you can see I'm on 192.168.2.25, which is the DMZ subnet rather than the 10.1.1 of this machine. So I can do some really cool stuff. I can browse the directory. I can do this. I can sabotage the home page here. Okay, so I'm done, right? You can tell that this site is owned. And the reason that you can tell is I may or may not have just replaced the home page with a quote-unquote login for Google, where in which anytime that you punch in a username and a password, that gets sent off to me, and I just owned you. Now, obviously, there's other layers of protection, but you get the idea, right? This app server is owned, and it's game over. So that's no good. And if we hop over to that application server, it looks normal. I haven't shut it down or anything. It's still up and running. It's providing a little bit strange of a application login page. And you can see there are some files here like an index.html and a shell.php that shouldn't be there. But again, because I've exploited it, it's game over. So let's fix that because I don't want to be all bad. Let's remove that. Let's remove our shell. Okay. And let's exit out of this here exploit. So if we hop back over here, that should now look like a regular Drupal site. And sure enough, okay, cool. Whew. All right, we're safe and sound. So what we just did was we owned a Drupal site. It was really not that hard to do. There was a layer of 3.4 firewall sitting between my site and my malicious actor. And it was really easy to get through. So what can we do? Well, we can put antivirus on. Maybe that'll pick it up. Obviously, the IDS, IPS didn't pick it up. I have an idea. So let me hop back in here to some slides. Obviously, we already went through that. Oh, okay. So here's the fun part. Web App Firewall, all the things. So maybe I lied a little bit. Right? That quote unquote load balancer is really a NetScaler. So NetScaler can run App Firewall. And of course, like I said, App Firewall, all the things. Probably wondering, okay, well, what is this App Firewall? What does it do? What can it protect against? So here's a nice list of all the things that you can protect against. And what you'll notice is that a lot of these are things that sound like attacks that you've probably heard of, or vulnerabilities like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, command injection, things like that, DOS protection. But there's more. So stream inspection, we look at both the response and the request. There's XML protections, right? So it does a whole heck of a lot of stuff, and it's all built into the App Firewall engine. So the way it works is it's got a bit of a hybrid model. When I say hybrid, I mean the best of both worlds. So the first part of this hybrid is the blacklisting. So when you think of blacklisting, think about traditional client antivirus, where I have a list of things that look like attacks, and I know these attacks, and I'm going to protect you against those known attacks, right? So we get signatures from Snort. You can also import signatures from, there's a whole list of third parties, and we'll go through that. But you can run a pen test against your site and then export the results of that, and then the App Firewall will ingest those as rules, and there you go, you're done. You rerun your pen test, and you're no longer vulnerable for any of those things that you were on the previous one. You can also write your own custom regex, but I have a problem. I fixed it with regex. Now I have two problems, so just stay away from that. The other part of this hybrid piece here is whitelisting, or learned behavior and heuristics as a part of the advanced protections and security checks that make this model so much more powerful. And the way that it works is via a learning mode and a learning behavior. So as clients come in, they're going to go through the NetScaler to access that resource. And as they do that, it's going to take those things as rules or create them as rules of acceptable behavior. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, wait a minute. What if a malicious actor comes in and starts to use the site? Isn't that going to generate a rule? Well, yes, it would. But that's what the allowed learned or trusted learning clients configuration does, is I only want certain clients to be trusted in order to create these rules. So when I define a host or a network as some, like an internal, like the developers, or like a testing group, I'm going to define those and say, hey, only traffic from those specific people is what is going to generate the rules. So when we do that, you only get the rules from the trusted folks. So how do you do this, right? How do you configure this kind of stuff? It's if you have Platinum Edition, you have App Firewall, you're licensed for it. If you're running on an SDX, you have all your instances are licensed as Platinum, so you get the feature. It's really just a checkbox to enable or disable. Although once you start building your configuration, it's going to annoy you with things like, hey, this feature is disabled. Would you like to enable it? So just check the box. That's all you got to do. If you're not familiar with how to do it, if you've never done it before, you can run through the wizard if you want, although hopefully after seeing this, you will be comfortable with it and you'll be able to build your own profiles and get going, so you don't have to use the wizard. One word of warning: if you do use the wizard, when you're done, it's going to bind the App Firewall policy globally, so just be careful in doing that. You can be more granular, obviously, with the manual configuration. Just be aware, right? If you want to use the wizard, maybe do it in your lab or do it, not in production. To go through the wizard, right? It's pretty simple and straightforward. Give it a name and give it a, what type of application is it? Just HTML? Is there some XML in there with maybe some SOAP calls, or is there some XML in there? That's all you really have to do, is define the new configuration. Specify the rule. Now, because this is going through the wizard, obviously when you build this rule, you want to be kind of specific, right? So you can say, hey, anything that matches a host name of sp-public, so SharePoint maybe, .company.com. Anything that matches that, or a specific URL, you can say that. Now, obviously you don't have to do that if you're going to bind the policy manually. And so you can bind it to a specific V server, like a load balancing V server or a gateway or whatever it might be. But in this case, you do want to be specific if you're going to use the wizard. Signatures. So the signatures are kind of the meat and the potatoes of the blacklist. And there are a number of default signatures that come out of the box. These are updated, I think it's daily. But again, we do get our signatures from Snort, and you can't import your own signatures at will, and we'll go through that. And it's a little bit convoluted the first time you see it. But you can kind of see that the server technology like Microsoft IIS or Cold Fusion, you can see those are called out as just kind of groupings of signatures. And so what you got to do is you have to enable the category that you've selected. Once you've done that, it'll display those. And then you actually have to go through and say, I want to block those specific, went too far, sorry, those specific groups, right? So by checking that box, you first select it or highlight it, and then you check the box for to enable it. So I know we're kind of going fast, but I really want to get through to the actual demo where we set this up. Some things about WAF that you need to know when you are going to troubleshoot this, right? First thing, the app firewall does have to see all your traffic, so you can't have an SSL bridge, right? Because SSL bridge is basically, we're not touching the traffic, so we can't see it, so we can't do anything with it. Same thing with compression, and you've probably run into this before if you've ever done a rewrite and responder. Don't use signatures for web technologies not in use, right? So if I'm running on PHP on Apache, I'm not going to turn on signatures for IIS. And your application does have to follow the standards, right? If it's not HTTP, good and well-formed HTTP, it's going to get dropped. So just be careful there. And that's something that you can't, uncheck a box to allow that, or make that a rule. That's just it. If it doesn't follow the standards, it gets dropped. Quick, easy way, if you want to find some things to, you're seeing some weird issues, you can look in the logs. The syslog is another great place to look at, as long as you're filtering by App Firewall. It's good stuff there. Of course, use security analytics. Hopefully we'll have time for that. And remember, avoid binding globally. If you run through the wizard, you're going to end up binding an App Firewall policy globally. That's no good. So hopefully after you see this, you can build your own policies manually and go through it that way. And check if you are seeing some weird issues, and I've seen this a couple times before, where all of a sudden an app just starts acting weird. Maybe App Firewall is interfering. You can see if App Firewall is turned on by looking for this specific header. Citrix _NS_ID means that the App Firewall is actually turned on. I mentioned one of the things as being checking in the syslog. So what that looks like is, this is just a screenshot from the syslog viewer. You can see here, signature violation rule ID 20620. So whatever reason, whatever that was, there was a buffer overflow attempt right now. If that was true, then great, it blocked it. But if you're just doing testing and you know that, hey, that's really an issue, I can go through and into my signatures and do a search for ID 20620, like in the rules, and I can prevent it from being blocked, or I can disable that specific signature because for whatever reason it's getting it's hitting a false positive. The other thing that I can do from the syslog is I can enable a rule, and so you can see here, disallow illegal URL is the rule that's being violated, and there's a little tiny checkbox in that top right corner. And if you check that box, you can actually go directly from here and make that an exception that goes through and gets allowed, right? So it's a super easy way for, if I'm just going through and I can't figure out what's going on, I see this in my syslog and I just want to make this a relaxation rule to make sure, hey, look, this is a known issue, but it's it's legitimate traffic. I can deploy this as a relaxation rule directly out of syslogs. So whilst I switch over to the demo here, any questions so far? I don't see any. So let's get busy. So I'm going to start over here with signatures, and that's really kind of the first place to start. And the way that you build out your signatures is you're going to use the default and then turn on some things for specific situations. And to do that, I'm going to highlight my default signatures, and I'm going to choose add, and then I'm going to say, give it a name, call it CUGC demo signature, and then I'm going to pick out which signatures I'd like to enable. So I know that I need some miscellaneous because in that category, there's just some things that are fairly miscellaneous, and they apply to pretty much all web apps. This is PHP, and this is actually new, and I think recently there are some Drupal signatures. So those are the three that I want, but you can see here these are checked. And what I need to actually do is, well, show hide doesn't do, you can see. So this is what I was talking about before, right? It's a little bit convoluted the first time you see it. I want to select the things that I want, right? And oh, I did it wrong. See, there we go. Select miscellaneous, select PHP and Drupal, and then show those. Then from there, I hop over here to enable all. That's going to say, hey, are you sure that you want to enable 670 some odd rules? You say yes. And you'll notice here that each of these, they're both, they're enabled. They are set to block and they will log, but they won't generate stats. Now, as with as in the demo that I did earlier, that screenshot, if I want something to still log, but maybe not prevent, I can uncheck the option there for blocking. So with that, if we scroll down a bit here, say OK to create those signatures. And there we go. So now I have a set of signatures. Now these are specific to this use case. The other thing to mention here is an update version. So hey, I'm already updated. I just updated earlier. So the base version is still base 23. Now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create an App Firewall profile. Now the profile is kind of where the meat and potatoes really exists. This is going to be CUGC demo profile. Now this is a Web 2.0 app, and I'm going to go with the advanced default. Now, why am I doing this, right? So in this scenario, maybe I just, I want to be as security conscious as possible. So I want to have all the advanced protections and not have any of the basic stuff. I want the best, right? What that's really doing is that's setting up the advanced defaults. And so let's go check out what that does. So if I go look at my security checks, you'll notice that absolutely everything is turned on. So my start URL, deny URL, the cookie consistency, buffer overflow, all that stuff is turned on. So I will show you what happens and why App Firewall can be kind of scary for some folks. The other thing that you do have to do is you have to bind your signatures. So we've created the signature set. Now all we have to do is just bind it, and that is, oh, didn't go far enough. There, I'm staring at it and I'm not seeing it. Bound signatures, there it is, hello, right in my face. CUGC, demo signature. Now obviously you're gonna have signature sets maybe for IIS apps. You're gonna have signature sets for CGI, have signature sets for Apache and those sort of things. And then for each of these profiles, you're going to bind those specific signatures to those profiles. And there you go. So there's a lot of other settings in here, and we'll go through a couple of them. But I just kind of want to demonstrate what happens when you maybe not sure what exactly is going on, how to configure App Firewall. I'm just going to say CUGC demo App Firewall. The profile is the one that we just created here. And I'm just going to go with http.request.is valid. So everything. Now, obviously, I wouldn't do that if you're binding globally, because then this App Firewall policy would hit every single thing. Now, if I hop down and I can remember how I configure this thing, I think it is I think it's this one. I don't remember. If I hop down here and I bind this App Firewall policy, I only have one. Select it, bind it, awesome. Done, and hopefully I'll get some hits on my policy. So if I just do a refresh here, hopefully I'll see some activity here. That might not up there. Okay, so I do have a hit. Okay, now, so everything seems great, right? Let's maybe we'll do a login here. Oh, uh-oh. Let me do a login. Oh gosh, that's not good. Let me see if I can go in here. to the, oh, so this is like the perfect example of what happens when you've just got too much stuff turned on and you're not going by the default. So you want to avoid this. And I did this on purpose. I left everything turned on without having any relaxation rules turned on, and that's not the way to do it. So here's an example of how not to do it. Now, what you really want to do is you want to go into your profile, and you actually want to turn all of these security checks off, right? And I know that sounds crazy, right? But you want to turn all of them off because they haven't learned anything yet. And the whole point of the learning engine is that it needs to go through and see some acceptable traffic over a period of time to build out those rules. So what I'm doing is I'm not blocking anything anymore, but I am learning, right? So you can see these check marks in the learning column where I'm going to watch the traffic and build rules based on that traffic. So now that that's set there, okay, a little error for XML, that's fine. And we can save that. Now, one other thing that I do want to do is check out my learned rules. And if I go in here to the trusted learning client, right, I need to add myself as a trusted learning client because I don't want it to learn things from the malicious actor that I may or may not also be. So I am 10.1.1. I think I'm 6. I should probably check that. Yep, 10.1.1.6. There you go, 10.1.1.6, full subnet, good stuff. Okay, so now I'm the trusted learning client, great. Let's go back and check and see what that looks like. Hopefully, hopefully I can actually log in. So let's go back to the home page here. All right, that looks good. Let's see if we can, actually log in this time. Oh, hey, see, look at that. I can actually log in. If I can remember my password. There we go. I am logged in. You can look at, I can go through. I can see my configuration. Everything looks so much better. Let me log out here. I can look at my super awesome article. Great. Now, since I've turned some stuff off, well, does that mean that I'm not protected? Well, I don't know. Why don't we check that out and see? So let's try this exploit again. So we'll go through, pretty much immediately, right? It comes back and says, hey, no dice, right? So all of that came back almost instantaneously. And all I've done is I've applied these signatures out of the box. I haven't turned on any learning or anything like that. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to go back through and double check. So what we can actually do is we can go back through and we can turn some of that stuff on. So you're probably wondering, well, how does that work? We hop back into that profile. We will look at some of these learned rules. Now there's a lot of learned rules in the different categories, and we'll start with the start URL. And what start URL really is defining is, think of it as a map of your website, of how can I get from this page to that page. Is there a URL? Do I have a refer header? How can I get from here to there? And there's a nice visualizer that's actually built into the UI. And if you click that link, it kind of builds out a map of your site. So I can see, okay, well, I can get to this page from here, and I can get to this page from here, and this image should be called from this page, and so on and so forth. So that's actually really cool. You can apply rules from the visualizer, or the easier way is to actually look at my start rules, start URL rules, and these should all make sense. And again, these are only image or paths or images that I have viewed from that trusted learning client, which is 10.1.1.6, which is me. Now, what you'll notice is that I only have this very short list. And you'll find on your site, you'll have hundreds, maybe thousands of rules, and it's kind of painful that first time, right? So what you'll see is by default, you'll get 25 per page. You can expand that out to 200. Makes things a lot easier. So when you select all, I'm just going to deploy these as relaxation rules. And yes, of course, I do want to apply these rules. So it will create those start URL rules. And there you go. There's no more of those learned rules. They have now been turned into what are called relaxation rules. And you can see those over here. What about cookie consistency? Do we have any cookie rules? Because NetScaler is monitoring the individual cookies that the site is using. And sure enough, we do have some cookie rules. So we can deploy these. Only 5 of those. And once that gets done, we should be able to move on to the next item. And again, I know this seems like a lot, but this is kind of the first time, right? The first learning run through once we've learned some of these rules. Content type, I think there will be a few in here. I could be wrong. Okay, yeah, I'm wrong. Form field consistency, there should be some form fields, although I don't know if I've used any of them. There's one, okay. We will deploy that rule. Not that big of a deal. So what's really nice is that the engine is building all these regex for you based on the learning engine. So that makes it a lot nicer. Now, we've built out a set of relaxation rules based on, oh, I didn't mean to do that, based on what traffic has been seen. So now I can go back into my security checks and I can turn some of these things on. So start URL, deny URL, cookie consistency, buffer overflows. Now you can turn on credit card, right? DLP. So if any credit card numbers are seen that match the algorithm of a credit card, they'll get dropped. So that's no good. You don't need those because I'm not storing credit cards in my Drupal. Some content types, some form fields, some HTML, SQL injection, XML, just to name a few. So I'll go ahead and block those. Now, if you remember the first time we turned all these things on, things were not pretty, right? I couldn't log in. The style sheets looked like they weren't there. It was no good. So let's go back to our home page. Hopefully, well, let's see. Okay, so we're here, we're good. If we go into the article, we can see the article, that's good. Something's going on, but I don't know what it is, gosh darn. Well, one of the things in troubleshooting this is look at your syslog. And we'll hop into that real fast here, if I can remember where it is, under auditing and syslog. Oops, nope, it's at the top. It's recent syslog messages. Now, this probably seems like kind of a painful process, and it's not the greatest in the world. But again, this is kind of a one-time thing that you can work through on a development site or on, on the test site. And once you've got the whole set of rules set up and good to go, then you can literally import, export, in that case, export, import onto your production site.
Yeah, Jake, I think one thing to always know and for everyone to know is that if you have an existing site, an existing VIP AAA server, is just clone it and give it a new IP that no one in the world knows except you. And that way you can test these things and not be worried. And that's the key to that test site. So clone something real. Nothing else knows about it. You might have to use a DNS record and stuff like that for SSL to work. But that's how you can do these things in baby steps.
Yep, absolutely, right. So if you've got a a site that's maybe not behind a NetScaler or one that is behind a VIP, like Patrick said, just clone it, right? Make another one that points to that same service and bind your App Firewall policy to that, and you're the only one, or the developers are the only one that have this new DNS record that points to that. Now, we were having some issues, right? So let's see, the refer header was not found in the start URL or the closure list. So what that means is that the application is not putting the right headers in to the closure list, and that's okay, right? That's not no fault of Drupal that they don't follow all the standards. So what do we do about that? That's kind of a pain. Is there something that how do we accept that? That was a security check, not a signature. So if we go in here, it did mention the start URL. If we hop over to security checks, and I will tell you that this is a common thing. So one of the things under start URL is some settings, right? So we can uncheck the URL closure, right? So what that allows it to do is it kind of excludes that. So that's one of the other settings that you will run into that kind of does some weird things and makes a website kind of misbehave. when there's App Firewall present. Now, some of the other things to talk about real quick. Well, I don't mean to do that. I keep doing that. One of the things that we will, other things that we'll look at here is some of the basic settings, right? You can define what happens when I do hit on an error or something that looks malicious. I can do a redirect. I can build a custom HTML blob and upload that to the App Firewall, and that gets presented to the user. Hey, you know, there was some error on the page, you know, rather than just a 404 or that error message that Drupal was posting up there. Or you could just, you know, redirect them back to the home page or something like that. There are some other character sets that you can specify. If you are running something non-default, you can modify that. If you have HTML comments, and this is really more of a kind of a homegrown application type thing where maybe the coder left in some, you know, some comments or some information. This kind of goes back to the information gathering where I'm able to understand what kind of application or what server it's running on. There might be something in the comments that the application developer left in there by accident. And what App Firewall can do is it recognizes comments and it'll just rip them out. It will literally strip those comments out so that it's effectively clean. And you know, that's, again, one more thing that you can do to prevent information leakage. So that said, we can take a look at seeing if our site is behaving a little bit better. Hopefully it is. So if I went into my my super awesome article here, and if I go to the page, oh, something else not working. That's okay. How are we doing on time here? I could probably, I think I know what's going on. So if I hop into the profile, or not the profile, rather the security, and I hop into my start URL, look at the action settings, your refer header, we don't want to block that. So let's set that, and let's see also if there are any more of those learned rules for start URL, because that one's kind of a painful one to deal with. Sure enough, there are. So we'll go ahead and deploy those. Now, this is a, you know, like I said, it's not pretty. This is really not the best way that you're going to go through this, right? What you're going to do is you're going to turn on learning, and you're going to let a developer, you know, kind of go to town, or, you know, even you could go to town long before you ever check the box for block, right? What that's going to do is that's going to generate just a ton of learned rules, and then from there you're not going to have to sit here and, you know, do this over and over again. So let's try one more time. Big money, no whammies. There it goes. So I can now get there. If we go back to my home page, look at that. That looks great. Let's see if I can log in. Oh, I can't log in. There's something there. But again, you get the idea, right? There's probably a start URL that's invalid there that I just need to put into my learned rules, and I'll be set there. So that's App Firewall in a nutshell. And again, the whole point here was that, you know, you've already got a NetScaler, right? And if you look at a traditional 3-tiered app, you've got a web server, a database server, and then you've got something out front that's probably doing some load balancing. Well, it understands applications, right? The NetScaler understands layer 7. It understands SQL. It understands PHP. It understands IIS and all these other technologies that are running your applications, and it also understands what is going on and what sort of security vulnerabilities there are. The other thing that I wanted to do super fast, since I have like 2 minutes left, was third-party signature sets. So if we hop over here, I happen to have IBM AppScan. So IBM AppScan, there's both a standard and enterprise. We work with both of them. And what you can do is you point AppScan at your website. It will go out and do that pen testing. It'll look for all these known vulnerabilities, all these different things. And it'll bring it back to you in a nice report format. And it'll say, give you some information, what's the issue, what's the fix, and those sort of things. But you can also do an export. And for IBM AppScan, you do want to export it as an earlier version, as a legacy. Why that is, I don't know. But you know, obviously Cisco Ace is also old. But so you take these results, you do an export, and then from there, I can actually hop into my NetScaler, go over to signatures, and I'm going to create a new set of signatures. And the file format, rather than being native, it's actually going to be from an external source. And the built-in XSLT format, and this is going to take a while, but we'll give it a go while we're looking at questions. If I can remember, there it is. There's that export. So these rules were exported from IBM AppScan standard, and we'll give it a minute to do an import. And it is obviously reading through a fairly large XML file to parse all of that. While it's doing that, I'm going to hop over to the questions pane, and I'll ask Patrick if he saw any.
Looks like the one thing that's come up is, do you also recommend running your header test against securityheaders.com, which is a site that kind of pulls known good and kind of lets you know what's in your header to know what bad information could be used in the F12.
Yep. So security headers is another good one. I'm a little bit hesitant there just because support for that is really dependent upon the browser, right? And so when you do that, you know, my Python or Ruby script, it doesn't care, right? It's not a browser, so you can put those in. That's great, but those don't necessarily protect you as well against you know, brute force type things. It's more of a man-in-the-middle exploit, like a downgrade attack. So you know, don't get me wrong, more security the better. But I found with a lot of those, like the security validation for the sources of all of your sub files and things like that, your CSS files and any other, you know, like JavaScripts that are running out, you know, out in the site, those can break sites very, very, very quickly because it's validating all of your sources for your style sheets and making sure that they're secure and that they're called properly. And yeah, it breaks stuff a lot for something that I don't think is quite as much value, but you know, certainly by all means, I would absolutely run that check through. In the last second here, in the last minute here, I have finally imported, and what you should see here is these are the rules that were actually exported from AppScan standard, and these will get saved as literally, you know, just AppScan demo, right? We'll give it a name. And these will get saved as a signature set on the NetScaler that you can bind or add to your signature set that will resolve any vulnerabilities found by the AppScan standard. So if you go out and you hire a pen testing firm or a security firm to do those sort of things, that's what you'll end up getting, right? And we do support Qualys and AppScan and Sensic and, you know, just a couple of other vendors out there. So App Firewall in a nutshell, that was the third-party signature import. And I think without further ado, I'm done. I'm just going to take a quick peek at the questions. Patrick or Stephanie, I'll hand it back to you.
Yep. We've just got one here. Is the external scan signature rules, are they complementary to the existing rule set or only a subset of the signatures? In other words, do we need to have a compiled signature file, including the default signatures and the ones from the external tools? So basically, yep. I think we're talking about the kind of positive versus negative equals hybrid security model, right?
Well, so signatures is one, right? So what you'll yep. find is that you'll create signatures for like an IIS server that's running certain things. You'll create signatures for, you know, Apache and those sort of things. And then you'll take the app scan, for example, and you'll load those into, you'll add them to your existing signatures. And again, what that'll do is that'll just, you know, reinforce the blacklisting of known vulnerabilities. But again, at some point in the future, there's going to be another vulnerability, a 0-day, or, you know, some other exploit. And if it's Drupal, it's, you know, like yesterday there was already vulnerability again. And so what that's going to do, the signatures are great, but then when there's more and more attacks, it's going to take some time for those signatures to get updated. It's going to take some time, you know, to rerun a vulnerability scan and get those added to your signatures. Whereas the learning mode, what that's going to do is that's going to prevent those 0 days, those unknowns. So hopefully that answers your question, right? You'll take signatures are one piece, right? And then the learning and the heuristics is the other. You can have multiple signatures and, you know, put those together and merge them. as a large signature set. And obviously, you're not going to you're not going to take multiple. You're not going to take IIS signatures and merge them with Apache.
Combat. Yeah, totally.
Yep.
And then the last one is that, obviously the Citrix ADC complements and stacks onto, other things like Apache mod security, mod evasive, and all the different security mods and Apache and IIS hardening that you can do because it's above that layer 3, right?
Right. Yep.
So that's a good one.
Yeah, and I mean, to that point, right? I mean, this Drupal test site was, man, I touched nothing, right? There's a lot of things like in those headers for that information gathering that will get hidden when you go through and you turn on mod security and you make sure your php.ini is clean and not exposing that information. Sure, absolutely. The more the better, like you said.
Cool. We're ready to rock and roll.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much to CUGC for letting me go through this presentation, and hopefully everyone has a great Halloween. Thanks, everybody.
Thank y'all. Have a great one.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Just a couple of quick housekeeping details before you all go away. I put a couple of links in the chat window for you. One is to a forum thread on mycugc.org. If you do have more questions, because I think Jake blew everyone away today and they're just absorbing all of that great information. If you do want to talk about the webinar or you do have more questions, you can type those in the forum thread that's in the chat and we'll make sure he sees those questions. And also that's another place to look for the link to the recording. This is being recorded and you will receive a link to it in email tomorrow, but you can also check that forum thread later tomorrow for the same link. And finally, there is another link in there to a survey. It's very short and sweet, and it's anonymous and just for CUGC use. We like to get your feedback on all our webinars, helps us plan future webinars, and we always ask you for suggestions for future topics, things like that. So please fill that out for us today. And with that, I will wish everyone a happy Halloween. And thank you again, Jake. Love that you were able to make time for us today. And thank you again to Patrick for being with us today and helping out with those questions. All right. I hope everyone has a great day. Oh, sorry, guys. Speak over you.
No worries. Just saying thanks.
Thank you. I hope everyone has a great day, and we'll see you at another CUGC webinar again soon. Bye.